Good evening, Jajinendra Badani. I hope you're all well, keeping safe and enjoying this wonderful weather we're having at the moment. Today we have with us Amit Gudka as part of our regular Oshwal Talks. We are looking for people who have a story to tell us, something to share that could inspire our community. A little bit about Amit. Amit Gudka, co-founder of Bulb Energy. It started in 2013. It started from scratch to deliver renewable energy and a more efficient way of working, serving customers. So I think, and Amit will, I'm sure will correct me if I'm wrong, around 1.7 million customers. And he's just stepped away from that to start a new venture in a renewable energy project, which he will cover in a little bit. So, Amit, if I could just bring you on. Over to you, Amit.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks, Paresh. Can you hear me okay? And
yeah, we can hear you perfectly.
Hear me and see me. Okay, good. Well, look, thanks a lot for having me. Great honor to speak to our community, to the Oshwal community. I'll just share some slides actually. Oh, it's kind of started it at the end, so hope I haven't ruined too much of the surprise there. So anyway, I'm going to speak a bit today about my background, about my sort of career journey to date, the two businesses that I've set up, which is sort of both renewable energy focused, so that's Bulb and now Virmati Energy, and hopefully give a bit of advice, especially to sort of young people who are looking maybe to set up a new business or looking at an earlier stage in their career, and thinking about what they want to do next. So yeah, a bit of background about me. This is a well-trodden Oshwal path, as it says here. So, just a bit of background here. My dad is Vipul Ketchi Nathu Shah. He's born in Thika. Thika, that's the Thika waterfall in Kenya in the middle picture. My mum is Rekha Somchen Petraj Shah, born in Nairobi, so not far away from Thika. And Ketchi, my grandfather, paternal grandfather, was born in Navagam, which is near Jamnagar, which I'm sure lots of us know well. And my maternal grandfather, Somchen, was born in Mitoi, also near Jamnagar. And on the right, so this journey from Jamnagar and the villages nearby to Kenya, followed up with the last stop there, which is northwest London. So we live near Preston Road. I was born near Preston Road, so in Harrow. My parents moved to London in the 1970s to go to university. My dad's an accountant. My mum's a pharmacist. Fairly classic Gujarati professions. But Oshwals are business people, Vanias, and that's what drove a lot of our grandparents to move from India to East Africa. But we also place a lot of value on education. This has been a real sort of driver of progress for our community. As I said, I was born in Harrow, as I'm sure a lot of people on this call were too. And looking back, I grew up around a lot of business people. On reflection, they were sort of everywhere in my life. So think about it. My dad was an accountant, but he had his own firm. My uncle Chandu, my late uncle Chandu, who had he had a photography shop in Wembley, so very near my dad's office. And so we were there all the time. Likewise, my mum's sister Aruna, she had a pharmacy in Ealing, and so we were in the shop always when we were growing up. And we'd go on Canada to see my family there. So particularly from my mum's side, A lot of my uncles and cousins were in business, set up a very successful sort of spice, rice, lentils, food sort of business over there. And Shah trading and Shashi as it's known. So, really around business people growing up, and I think that's had a huge influence, kind of without knowing it, but on I guess what we've gone on to do next. But alongside that, we place a huge amount of value on education in our community, and I think that really sets us up to succeed. Even if you don't know what you want to do at a young age or even later in life, the skills, the curiosity, the work ethic you get from education, I think is invaluable. So, and I think that really is a big part of our community as Gujaratis, as Jades, as Oshwals. I studied maths at university. It was my favorite subject at school. I found it much harder when I went to university. A lot of the maths became very abstract. But the ability to problem solve, to think analytically, and I think that's been hugely important in the career that I've had since. So felt really proud kind of going through that degree, coming out with a 2-1. Even though I think it was quite tricky at points. I've always really been into music. I've DJed since I was a teenager. I run club nights and a record label for the last 15 years as well, sort of a passion project on the side. I've actually done that with a sort of fellow Oshwal, Nikhil Shah, who's a very good friend. And he also helped me with, gave me a lot of advice through my maths degree when we were at Cambridge together. But he was also someone who was a real sort of inspiration in terms of business. So he founded a music tech startup called Mixcloud, which has been very successful since, and was a very sort of early kind of London technology startup in sort of the late noughties, and been very successful and a real inspiration. So I think we have really seen a lot of our generation of Oshwals and young Asians kind of making the move from professional work, which would go to university, go into professional work, and then making the move into business as well. But yeah, part of me always also wanted to pursue this career in music. I did think about it very, very closely many times. At one point I was looking to set up a club in East London. I looked very closely at sort of setting up a record label as my taking that as my sort of full-time business. It didn't quite work out, but I think having pursued it as a hobby as far as I have and did has been really fulfilling. And again, I think that's something to say, that really following passions through, whether they are your full-time job or whether they are a hobby, I think can be really rewarding. So anyway, after university, I got a job in the city, got a job at Barclays in energy trading. I did that for nearly 8 years, and I met people, and learned a lot during that time. And those things have really shaped my career. So I really enjoyed the job. I think it was really fast-paced, intellectually stimulating, and of course well paid, which is something that's very exciting in your 20s. But I did start to really sort of question the value of that, and also the impact that the impact of that job, and I wanted to do something with more impact. Whilst I was trading energy, I really saw how the energy supply market wasn't sort of treating consumers fairly. You saw that it was incumbent dominated. So typically people in the energy supply market were, or domestic and homes were supplied by what are known as the big six. So household names that many of you will know: British Gas, E.ON, EDF, Npower, Scottish Power, SSE. Those were the big six, and those were the energy suppliers that most people had in their homes. What you saw was that people were paying a lot of money to be supplied by those energy suppliers. They were paying more than they should do. And whilst they were paying more, they were also receiving really bad service at the time. So when we saw customer service surveys for those companies, They were really poor. There were some of the worst customer service ratings out of any industry. And, that's even compared to the likes of Ryanair, or, banks, which had a really bad name at that time after the financial crash. So energy supply customers were getting a really bad deal. So yeah, prices were high, service was poor, and finally also renewable tariffs. So buying renewable energy from your supplier was overpriced. Renewable energy doesn't need to cost as much as it did. And we saw that as really unfair. And we thought that as a result, renewable energy would be sort of treated as a premium product as opposed to something that was affordable and for everyone. So, I was thinking a lot of these thoughts. I got talking about it with a friend, Hayden, who, been friends with for a few years before. He was a consultant, also consulting on energy companies. And we got talking about, these opportunities and these challenges that consumers faced in these markets. And, after talking about it for a while, in 2014, we made the jump. We decided to leave our respective jobs, so at Barclays and at Bain, to set up Bulb. And it took a couple of working sessions, but we really sort of deep dived into the market and deep dived into the business opportunity here. And whilst it was a big leap, we thought it was a big enough opportunity to make that jump from our existing jobs. So what is Bulb? Bulb is an energy supplier. So you can buy your gas and electricity from home from big incumbent energy suppliers, like I mentioned before, so British Gas, EDF, etc. Or you can choose to get your energy from a challenger supplier. So, and Bulb is one of those. So there are some others out there that you might have heard of, like Octopus, like OVO, like Shell. And so Bulb is one of those challenger energy suppliers. It was a big leap for us to make this move to run this business. None of us had ever run a business before, except my record label, which was much smaller. And this was, a big industry with multi-billion pound competitors, international companies with huge amounts of money. So how were we going to go into this sector and compete with the likes of British Gas? We did a huge amount of research. We really deep dived into the business plan, the business model. We built a really detailed financial model. And these were the things that really set us up to understand what we were doing, and that this was a business that we could make work, even though it seemed like the odds were stacked against us. We needed to raise in the order of £1.2 million to get the business off the ground. So that was to build, to get licensed in the energy market, to acquire some initial software, to build out the initial team, and to have sufficient money over the first 18 months. So that's what the amount that we needed. We decided we needed to raise. And that's a substantial amount of money for a company without a track record, and without a business that already exists. So again, how did we do that? We invested some of our a significant amount of our own savings as initial money to show that we were serious. We went round to friends, family, colleagues to raise this initial capital, and I think that was a real lesson in how important it is to maintain that sort of network of contacts. The one that I built through my time at Barclays was so important within that, and they really kind of backed us and backed the business at that point, and took quite a big risk on it. Must also say, being part of the Oshwal community, which is such a sort of a broad community with so much experience and knowledge and business acumen, was very supportive as well. So a significant amount of the money that was raised in that first round was from sort of fellow Oshwals, family members, but also friends and family friends who really helped out at that point. And so the power of community at that point again showed how I saw how important that was, and how lucky we are to have that. And that is something that we can all lean on. So we eventually got there. We eventually raised that money over a period of sort of 6 months, and that was alongside building out the business case further, setting up our systems, and then we launched. And it was quite interesting when we initially launched. We thought that lots of people would switch to us, and actually growth was really slow at the beginning. Again, as I mentioned before, it's a big market. There are lots of different competitors in there, and so to get people to switch from their existing suppliers, the likes of British Gas or EDF or E.ON, to a relative unknown like Bulb was tricky. And again, this is where I often joke about it, and it's a bit of a joke at the Bulb office. But out of the first 100 customers we had, probably 50 had the surname Shah. And it was the case that again we had a lot of support from family, friends, and the community in those real initial customer numbers. So real power of community once again helping. And not to say as well, not to forget, our very first advert was actually in the Oshwal News. It's nice that we've now got adverts on TV, which you may have seen, but the first advert was in Oshwal News back then. So look, 6 years later, as sort of Paresh mentioned, really proud. We have 1.7 million customers, annualized revenues of sort of over $2 billion, 800 staff, and relatively new operations. But I definitely would say that's surpassed my expectations. Paresh, sorry, can I just check? Can you hear me okay on this?
We can. I think there was a slight pause there. Maybe connection was not so good, but it's okay now. Okay,
good. Just please shout if that happens again, because I did get it pop up and say your connection's a bit unstable. So yeah, really proud of the progress that we've made, being the fastest growing company in the UK twice, and the fastest growing company in Europe as well. So really happy with that, but also really happy and proud of some of the other things we've done. For example, we are a B Corp, and a B Corp is a company that not only sort of values itself on profit, but it thinks about people, planet, and profit. So it thinks about multiple stakeholders, rather than just on profit. And we've been a B Corp since very early on, and we still are. And it becomes harder and harder to remain a B Corp. There's quite a stringent sort of checks and sort of tests that you need, and certification you need to go through every 2 or 3 years. And what that means is, there's a number of criteria that you pass, such as, who are your suppliers and where are they based, as well as, what is the equality like, the pay equality, for example, within your company. So what's the difference between the highest paid and sort of the lowest paid people in the company? And we've really, it's been a big part of the business, and I think it really means that as you grow, you continue to make make the right decisions. We also set up a foundation, the Bulb Foundation, and have donated in the order of £4 million to charities over that period too. So yeah, I guess just sort of on that point, just advice on starting a business, which I went through before. Make sure you do your research. I think spending that time understanding the market, really thinking about it, was really important, and spend time building that business plan. It feels at times, it feels a bit slow, and you really want to get going on on business and get started on stuff, and you feel like you might be falling behind others. But I think it's really important to build those foundations. And likewise, I'd say understanding your financial model is so important. Cash is king, as people say in the business, and it's so important to understand your cash flow. As so many businesses get caught out by that, and really, really being all over that from the start is so important. And as the founders or owners of a business, it's your responsibility to be on top of that. And then lastly, get advice and help from as many people as possible. People are really helpful, and don't be scared to reach out. People are very helpful, and that's one of the benefits we have of our sort of very wide and rich community, that there's a lot of people to ask with a lot of experience. There's a lot of learnings as well that we've had from running this business. It's been, there's been lots of ups and downs, and I just sort of said some of the highlights previously as well. But it's really challenging at times, and there's been a lot of learnings that we've had from it. So just some, to run through some lessons that I've had from founding and running Bulb. You really never know it all, and you constantly keep learning. It's probably, from all of those sort of learning experiences through life, it's probably been the most intense period of learning, in the last 5 years, the last 6 years of doing Bulb, and be really open to that. I think secondly, you often feel like an imposter, and uncomfortable and sort of outside of your comfort zone, and I think that feels uncomfortable, but actually is a sign that you are pushing yourself to do different things. So whilst it's not always an easy feeling, I think it shows that you are pushing yourself. Consistency is key. It takes working on a business is something that you work on for a long period of time, and being consistent throughout that, consistent in your relationships, consistent in how hard you work, making sure you have enough energy, so not burning yourself out, is really important. I think number 4 is something you really learn over time, but difficult situations arise all the time, and it's and some of them feel really insurmountable. So your funding might have fallen through, or a contract that you were going to sign might actually not be possible, and you need to find another supplier at the very last minute. These things can appear and feel really difficult, but pretty much always there's a way through. You just need to sort of step back, rely on your advisors, think through problems, and pick them apart bit by bit, and there's often, and there pretty much always is a way through. And finally, I think as well, being transparent and acting with integrity is so important. Those relationships, business relationships that you make early on, and you treat well and you treat fairly, so often those things come back in a positive way. And likewise, the opposite end of that is, if you're dishonest with people, I think that will really come back to bite. So it's really important to do that and to do the right thing. So next, I recently announced that I'm actually going to be setting up a new business, Virmati Energy, and that will build the renewable energy infrastructure that's required for us to get to net zero. So I'll describe a bit more of what that all really means. That Bulb is an energy supply business. It supplies energy to people's homes. There's also a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built, so renewable energy infrastructure. So in order for us to meet our sort of climate goals, and governments are setting big policy goals for reaching net zero, a lot of renewable energy generation needs to be built. So that's wind, that's solar. And often the issue with wind and solar is that whilst it's when it's windy or when it's sunny, there's an abundance of that energy. When it isn't windy or sunny, where do you get your energy from? And so the ability to be able to store that energy when it's windy or sunny, so store that in a battery, and then use it when you need it, so at peak time, so in the evening, say when everyone's using their electricity, is very important for us to really scale up renewable generation and for the world to meet its sort of net zero goals and really help sort of avoid some of the climate catastrophe that's on the way otherwise. I've seen this as a big opportunity for a long time, and towards the end of last year, it became really apparent to me that the build out of energy storage in particular and batteries was something that really needs to accelerate, and there's a big opportunity to do that here. And so, whilst it's sad to leave bulb, in a similar way to I felt compelled to move into this opportunity 6 years ago with bulb, I felt compelled to go and set this up. So we're really trying to solve this intermittency issue, so the fact that how do you store the energy from renewable generation and really accelerate that. Just as a kind of to give you an idea of what a battery is or what a battery looks like, a battery plant or battery farm that we would build would be about 20 porta cabins or 20 containers in a field connected to the grid, and we would control it. We would charge the battery up when electricity is cheap and there's an oversupply of it, and we would dispatch or discharge the battery onto the grid when the electricity price was high and there was high demand for it. In terms of the name, so it's named after my late grandmother, Virmati. So my dad's mum. Vir means brave or heroic, and Mati means spirit or mentality. So the name means kind of heroic or brave mentality. And this is, I think, really embodies what my grandmother was all about. And I think also embodies, I think, the challenge that we face in terms of dealing with sort of climate change, and the attitude that needs to be taken to really head it off. So and to face the challenges and to build up the infrastructure, build up the technology that we need to try and do something about climate change. So that's where the name comes from. And it's been really nice it felt very natural to name it after her. And it's been really fun, telling people the story behind that. And it's also been very funny hearing people trying to pronounce her name. So, conclusion from, starting up a business second time round, it's really, it's really exciting to do so. You're taking so much kind of knowledge and experience from having done it before. And, hopefully that means you can do it sort of even better second time. Some key lessons, I'd say that I'm learning is build the right team early, hire the right people where you can. It's really important. And, good hires early on really help you accelerate. Move quick and learn quickly as well. I would say don't be rash and, be thoughtful, but once you've decided on something, really, try and move on it quickly. The compounding effect of that is so important. Look, brand and story is really important. It was really important with Bulb, and I think communicating what your business is about effectively is really important. And finding business success is I think it's like 10% idea and 90% execution. And it is a cliche, but I think it's so true. A lot of people will have good ideas about businesses, but really seeing it through to completion and following your plan, create a good plan and stick to it. Be consistent, be perseverant, be adaptable and, learn, but really have a plan and stick to it. And that will really take you far, because even if a business or industry feels competitive, good execution will get you a long way. So I think, Paresh, I don't know in terms of time, what we have.
We've got time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just going back to the point on community as well. I've really learned how important, family, community are as an entrepreneur. The support and wisdom we've had from everyone has really helped. And we should really be proud of it as Oshwals, and really proud of the community we have around us. Lean on it, and as I said before, don't be afraid to ask for help. Maybe if I was to go into just a few more tips just for people who are starting out, it's you don't need to know what you want to do as a teenager, and you might try lots of, or teenager or even later, you might try lots of things out before you find the thing that fits. But being passionate about whatever it is you do is really important. So part of growing up is all about gaining experiences, working on what you care about, and that could be finding a degree that you love. It could be hands-on experience at work, could be something completely different. I learned a lot about working with people and setting stuff up and making things happen, actually from doing club nights and running a record label. So well before doing Bulb. But be curious and go deep. So there's no way that I would have known when I was younger that energy was the thing that really interested me and excited me and would be the thing that I'd be so passionate about later on. But by taking on actually what was a relatively classic job, right? Working in the city, working for a bank. That's why I learned about energy, and that's why I got really interested in it. So these kind of more like traditional professions can actually lead to a lot of really exciting roles. I have friends who are who are lawyers, but have also really been into music and now are very successful lawyers to some of the top musicians that we'll know. So finding out about the world around you, what you care about, what you want to make a difference, and then really going into depth on it later on is really important. So if you want to be a business person as well, don't feel like the idea, don't feel like you have to come up with an idea. Really try and focus on what interests you, and the opportunities and problems for a business will arise later, as opposed to just trying to force it and saying, I want to be a business person, I want to go and set something up just to be my own boss. And I think that's it for me, Paresh.
Thanks, Nikhil. Amit, sorry. Hi, sorry about that. I'm just looking at the question from Nikhil. So Nikhil's asking, batteries at the moment are fairly unstable and have a low energy density compared to the required energy demands. What other ways do you think we might be able to store energy, i.e. fuel cells?
So hydrogen fuel cells are less efficient than lithium-ion batteries. So lithium-ion batteries, which is what we're working on first at grid scale, are the most efficient way of storing electricity at the moment. I think the issue with lithium-ion batteries is that they are shorter duration, so you can't store things for a long period of time. So the big problem that needs to be resolved probably going forwards is not just short-term storage. So how do you manage volatility between electricity prices in a day, but how do you store energy between the summer and winter? And yeah, that's still a big problem that needs to be solved.
The other thing from Raj Shah is, have you selected the lithium route, or are you involved in other technologies? Example, electrolyzer or flow cells? I think you've answered that partly.
Yeah, exactly. Lithium ion is definitely where we're starting. I think, the other important thing to mention as well is lithium ion batteries are a technology that's really, that is economic now. And as other technologies become economic, we'll be looking to scale those up. But I think we see things like hydrogen kind of 5 years down the line before we're investing in building that out.
Then there's somebody else. Amit, so proud of your foresight and perseverance instead of batteries. Isn't there any other means to store electricity, such as capacitors?
Yeah, I mean, the similar answer to before. The thing that we see the most economic and viable way of doing that right now is lithium-ion batteries at the grid scale. There's lots of other opportunities coming down the line.
So, Amit, some of the things that you mentioned, which really resonate well with me, like consistency, transparency, integrity, fairness, community, inclusiveness, I think is one of your kind of mottos in when you set up the bulb offices. I think in Newham, which I think you said that nobody was going there, and you went there. Do you want to just explain a little bit about why you did that and what your reasons were?
Sorry, what was we didn't set up in Newham?
No, so in sort of an area where it was kind of difficult to recruit people, I think.
Yeah, actually, so I think actually what probably I think it might be a bit of confusion around that. But one of the things that we did that was quite different was typically energy companies, the way that they're doing, you'd have a sort of swanky head office in central London where the executive team and maybe some software engineers would be in central London, and they would put the call center, which would be quite sort of low paid jobs, out somewhere in the sticks in the country where and we thought actually we wanted to have our whole operation in central London, because that's where we could hire the best talent. So that was quite a different way that we went around recruiting. We thought that having our operations and customer service team quite closely aligned with our product development software engineers in the same office would lead to a much better experience in the end for customers, because ultimately it's customer service teams who are on the front line with customers and really understand their needs, and it's important they can relay that back to to software engineers and the executive team very closely.
Glad to see you're from Noagam, so are we. So that's good. Some commonality there. Some of the questions that have come through is, what advice would you give to a young entrepreneur? I think you've covered some, but is there anything specific? Who are your mentors? Did you have any guidance from people?
Yeah. So look, I think there was lots of. I think having that guidance and mentorship is really important, and there's lots of people out there kind of willing to help. I think within your specific sector there will be people who are really experienced, but looking even further beyond that, I spent a lot of time speaking to old colleagues about this sector in particular. I also spent a lot of time talking about this with my dad. And again, the Oshwal community, there's a lot of business people and a lot of financial experience there as well, who are really important to lean on. But yeah, I guess overall for young entrepreneurs, someone who's looking to make the jump maybe from a professional role to starting their own business, also just the amount of experience you gain by doing it is sort of immeasurable. And you will gain so much from that it will ultimately be, you could always go back to what you were doing before with a lot more experience and be kind of almost more employable for having had that experience. So making the jump is something that ends up being a net positive. So don't be afraid to do that.
I've got a couple of people. Sachita Shah saying, love working with Bulb as my client at Facebook. Can't wait to see the growth of Virmati Energy. Vaishali Shah have you found it easier to raise financing with an increased focus on ESG and sustainability, particularly from institutional investors?
Yeah, I think, and that's quite very much at the moment for Virmati, there's a lot of interest because there's been this big shift to ESG, this big ESG focus from institutional investors. I think there's a huge amount of money sitting out there to invest in like real ESG businesses. In fact, there's so much money sitting there that they're often ending up having to deploy money to companies that you would argue aren't that ESG focused. So I think there's a lot of capital sitting out there ready to deploy into these sort of sectors, which makes it a very exciting time. It's just really getting those ESG investors from institutions comfortable with new assets such as batteries, which are potentially a bit more complex to the revenues from them are more complex to understand. So it's getting those investors comfortable with that is the challenge. But otherwise, if we can do that, I think there's a lot of investment out there.
Thank you. Michelle Shah, this sector is clearly a lot more in vogue now. However, what were the challenges you faced in the earlier days where the SPACs were not as much in focus?
What was the last bit? Where the
SPACs, SPACs?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're not raising money from SPACs right now. So special purpose acquisition companies, I think, is what it stands for. We're not in raising money from those investors right now. ESG is, I think, as Vaishali asked before, and I said before, there is a lot of money around from that. But really, you need something like $15 trillion needs to be deployed into the renewable transition over the next 20 years to make this happen for us to achieve these net zero targets. That's money that just has to be deployed. Otherwise, we face some pretty bad sort of climate outcomes as a result. So, and these things are becoming economic. They're more economic than building new gas plants or new coal plants. So, I think it is. You could argue it's in vogue right now, but really it's the transition that is going to happen for the next 20 or 30 years.
Again, another question for Vaishali is, do you find the interest coming from the private credit markets?
Yes, there has been, and because this is something that's asset backed and potentially with, again, like I said, maybe a bit more complex revenue streams than just your, a solar farm or a wind farm. So actually, it's quite attractive to private credit markets.
In terms of yourself, I mean, you've kind of gone against the grain because you could have gone into something that was working and jumped on that bandwagon, whereas you've actually gone out and set up something totally different. So what was your kind of most challenging thing that you had to do when you were setting this bulb energy up?
I think, like I mentioned in the setup, that fundraising initially, I think was tricky. We didn't have a working model yet. Often people will go and, for, say, if you're raising for a technology, a software company, you might have a working product, like an MVP that you go around and you show, and that's what people invest on the back of. Whilst we were having to do this from scratch, kind of just with a business plan. So that was quite challenging. I think there was that initial period when, going into business, I think the initial growth was quite tricky, as I mentioned. We thought that this was going to be, we thought we had a really good product, right? It was energy that was cheaper than what was out there. It was renewable and the service was good. We thought that's just a winning formula and people would just sign up. And it turns out, there's a lot of inertia in these markets. People don't want to switch energy supplier because they're worried that their lights might go off when they do so, even though that's something that will happen. But that's sort of the small fear in a lot of people's minds, and that hassle factor. So really changing that, I think, was a big challenge at first. And that's where our referral program was so important, because if someone's out there advertising it to you, saying it's going to happen, you're less likely than if one of your friends or family members tells you to do it. So the referral program was really important for us, and that really drove that word of mouth, which is so important for people breaking the inertia. And then I think sort of big challenges later, just like growing the team. So we started out as 2 of us. We were, after a year, we were 8 of us in a room, and very quick, a year later, we were 70 people, then 300, and now we're at 800 sort of. And managing that and scaling that properly, I think is really is hard. And when you go from there being all of you are in one room, so all of you understand what is going on, and you understand, you have contacts over everything, to being all on one floor, to being on multiple floors, to being in multiple buildings. It's it's doing that whilst also maintaining speed and velocity of decision making is a challenge, and it takes a lot of thought, and probably something that I personally didn't appreciate, like how challenging that would be.
A few more questions, Amit. One was from Raj. Are you involved in R&D or application only?
Yeah, we're not doing R&D on batteries at the moment. It's a big it's a different part of the value chain that we're not involved in, and I think the budgets and the speed with where that's moved to, particularly compared to Chinese sort of R&D budgets, etc. I think it's something that we're a while off doing. It's more integrating, like constructing, financing, and operating.
Question from Kushal Shah. How was it for you exiting Bulb, a company you'd put a lot of effort into building?
Yeah, look, I think it's always it's sad, right, to move on from something, and there's a bit of I would say there's probably a bit of FOMO as well, because there's a bunch of things that exciting things Bulb is going to do that I'm not I won't be directly a part of, but I'm still a big shareholder and a director of the company and director of the trustee of the Bulb Foundation. So I'm still quite involved, but probably more of a strategic level. And then I think the just excitement of the new project is sort of really kind of how busy I am with that, and the energy doing a new thing. So yeah, it's multiple emotions, but overall sort of very exciting. But sad to also not be working around some of the really great people who worked so closely with through such an intense period.
Nick Hill's asking, thanks for your previous answer. A lot of raw materials from Li-ion batteries, like cobalt, comes from high conflict areas. Will this create problems when appealing to investors?
I mean, I think it's one of the supply chain for all of this sort of the new renewable, say for solar as well. The supply chain for that, I think, is a big area that needs a lot of focus. It's something that we're thinking about closely. But yeah, we're very aware that nickel, cobalt are going to be areas where we need to be very, very clear on what our supply chain is and who we're getting these, where we're getting these batteries from.
I think a couple of more questions. I think again, Raj Shah is asking, any ambitions beyond peak demand, like lithium recycling?
Sorry, did you say beyond peak demand?
Peak demand, like lithium recycling.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have there's a huge opportunity. Just zooming out a bit, I think the initial focus is on UK battery storage. Longer term, we want to be a company that finances, builds, and operates all types of renewable energy infrastructure. So whether that is now storage in the future, like hydrogen in the future, carbon removal and carbon capture storage, does that also then go into EV charging as well? Do we go into EV charging? There's a huge amount of opportunity here. We're starting with the UK, with battery storage in the UK.
Thank you, Amit. Just you going back to something that you've mentioned about music and Mixcloud and Nikhil. I think it's one person we've been trying to get hold of. So I think we'd like to bring at some point both you and Nikhil, because if you're been involved with that, it'd be nice to hear that alternative story from, as you said, Oshwal's were mainstream business people, but going into different industries. It's be useful to share that with our community as well as the younger members of the community. We have a couple of guys in the South who are DJs and music producing. So it'd be really nice to get you guys together at some point. So your help in getting Nikhil to come in would be great.
I can track him down for sure.
Right, thank you. I know we've kind of been connected on and off for a while, and really glad to have you on board and doing this talk. And comments are very inspirational talk. Thank you, and frank views. Inspirational talk, and hopefully some of the younger members of the audience. I know my son's watching. He's asked a few questions. So really grateful, and thank you for coming on and sharing your journey, and hopefully we'll come back and share more of your journey and Virmati Energy. One of the questions or thing is that we had a couple of months ago, we had two guys, Ricky and Savan, who set up an Amazon business, and then they sold it off at a good value, and they kind of helped to mentor a few people who are doing similar things. Is there something that you would get involved in at all, helping some of our members?
Yeah, for sure. There's personally, but also I think as a business, we were talking today with the Kickstart scheme, which the government Kickstart scheme, which you might have read about. So it's for 16 to 24-year-olds who are could be on a universal credit, but it's generally aimed at people who have had difficulties career-wise, driven by the pandemic. And we're a relatively small team at the moment, or we are a small team at the moment, but it's something we want to get involved in doing and build that into what Virmati is doing. So I think across the board, we definitely want to be like mentoring people. And I think also, actually, if you look at this sector in particular, like, even more so than bulb, like what Virmati is doing, which is, energy infrastructure, financing. It's a very, it's a kind of city, it's asset investment. And typically, if you look at the groups in that, it's not a very diverse sector, and we do want to try and change that as well, and make Virmati to be a more diverse and inclusive company than other players in that field.
Thank you, Amit. I'm really glad to have had you on today on Oshwal Talks, and hopefully we'll, as I said, we'll see you again soon with other people. And I think we would trying to encourage younger people or younger Oshwals that are not usually seen like we used to do in the past, where people would see who they are. And at the moment, people have got businesses, but not always in the eye of Oshwa. So it's good inspirational advice. Thank you very much for that. And if anybody wants to speak to Amit, what we can do is if you write into Oshwal web at oshwal.org, and then we'll forward the email to Amit, and then Amit can contact as needed.
For sure.
So, thank you, Amit. Thanks very much for your time, and good luck.
Thanks, Paresh. Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Tomorrow, don't forget the yoga session is at 11:30 instead of 10:30. Normally it's at 10:30, but because of change of time, 11:30. And then tomorrow evening, we've got first in a session of Oshwal Financial Education at 7:30 again. So hopefully see you then. Thank you. Have a good evening.